Okay, so what if I told you the US dollar isn't really backed by gold anymore, or even oil? What if it's now being anchored to something way more powerful? Artificial intelligence. Now, I know that sounds like something straight out of science fiction, but stick with me, because this might just be the single biggest economic shift of our lifetime. So let me just ask you this straight up. What do you think is really backing the US dollar right now? I mean, we've all heard the official story, right? The full faith and credit of the United States government. But what if the real answer, the one that actually moves markets and starts wars, is something totally different? Because here's the thing, the dollar's real power, it doesn't come from people trusting it. It comes from creating a global system where you have no choice but to use it, a necessity you literally can't refuse. This is the secret mechanism that has been running the world for the last 50 years. Let's dig into it. To really get where we're going, we have to look back at where we've been. And it all goes back to a deal made back in 1974, a quiet agreement that completely reshaped the world and created something called the petrodollar system. You know, the idea was just brutally simple. And honestly, it was kind of genius. The US made a deal with Saudi Arabia that said, from now on, all oil has to be bought and sold in US dollars. That's it. In return, America would provide military protection. This meant that any country that needed to buy oil, which was, basically every single country on Earth, had to get US dollars first. It was never about trust, it was all about forcing a necessity. And this deal, it created a simple, unspoken rule for the next 50 years. You do not mess with a dollar's connection to oil. The truth is often hidden behind the headlines and the quarterly reports, but if you look back, you start to see a very clear, very brutal pattern for anyone who dared to challenge it. Let's take Iraq in 2003. The official reason for the invasion? Weapons of mass destruction. But here's what's really worth noting. Just 3 years before that, Saddam Hussein had started selling Iraqi oil in euros, a direct threat to the system. And you know what happened after the invasion? No WMDs were ever found, but you can bet Iraqi oil sales were immediately switched right back to US dollars. Or how about Libya in 2011? The story we were told was a humanitarian crisis. But the truth hidden behind the numbers was that Muammar Gaddafi was in the process of creating a new gold-backed African currency. The whole point was to sell African oil without ever using the dollar. Well, shortly after that, he was overthrown, and that plan, it died right along with him. And the pattern just keeps going. You've got Iran, Venezuela, Russia, every single one of them hit with crippling sanctions right after they tried to sell their energy for something other than dollars. The message, even though it was never said out loud, was crystal clear. You threaten the petrodollar, you will pay a heavy price. This was never really about WMDs or human rights. It was about protecting the anchor. But here's the twist. That entire era, it's ending. The very anchor that has kept the dollar on top for half a century is now rusting away. It's starting to break. And the reason is actually pretty simple. Technology. The whole world is shifting to electric vehicles, solar power, wind turbines. Our dependence on oil is dropping, slowly but surely. And think about it. If the world doesn't need as much oil, well, it doesn't need as many dollars to buy that oil. The whole system is starting to come apart at the seams. And this brings us to a really key idea from the investor Ray Dalio. He talks about these big cycles in history, and he says that technological innovation always leads the way. Reserve currency status, which country's money is on top, that always follows. So a nation has to dominate in tech first before its currency can dominate the world. Which leads us to a pretty big question. So if Dalio's right, if technology is really the thing that decides who the next global power is, then what's the single most important tech revolution happening right now? The answer is obvious, right? It's artificial intelligence. And this, right here, is where the new strategy snaps into focus. We are literally watching this happen in real time. The US is strategically re-anchoring the dollar, swapping out its old foundation of oil for the one resource that is absolutely essential for AI, computing power. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Just look at this. It's the exact same playbook, just with a new resource. Back then, you controlled oil supply with military bases in Saudi Arabia. Today, you control chip supply with the CHIPS Act. Back then, you sanctioned Iranian oil. Today, you ban high-end chip exports to China. Securing the Strait of Hormuz to control oil flow becomes moving TSMC's advanced factories to Arizona to control the chip flow. It's the same game, just a different playing field. By the way, if you're finding this analysis interesting, please go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. That way you won't miss what's coming next. So let's be really clear here. This is not just about building cool new technology or making progress for humanity. This is a cold, calculated geopolitical strategy. The goal is to establish absolute, undeniable supremacy over the world's supply of compute. Okay, so that's the big picture. But what does all this geopolitical chess actually mean for us? For you, for me, for our money, and for how we should be looking at the world? All right, here are the key things you need to walk away with. First, AI is not a bubble. It's the new essential infrastructure of the world, just like oil pipelines were 100 years ago. That means the US-China chip war isn't just some trade squabble, it's a full-blown currency war, and it's not going away. The companies that control compute, we're talking NVIDIA, TSMC, ASML, they are the new OPEC, the new global kingmakers. And yeah, while Bitcoin might have a role to play, it's just too volatile to be a real anchor. But look, the absolute biggest mistake you can make is thinking this is just a story about technology. It's not. It is a fundamental shift in global power. When you look at it this way, you can see this grand historical arc. We started by anchoring value to matter, scarcity, gold. Then we moved to an anchor of energy scarcity, oil. And now we're entering a brand new era defined by intelligence scarcity, where compute, the ability to generate intelligence itself, is the most valuable resource on the planet. You know, the phrase on every dollar bill says, "In God we trust." But if we're being honest, a more accurate history of the last century might be, in 1944, it was "In gold we trust." By 1974, it had become "In oil we trust." And today, as this new world order is being built around us, the new unspoken motto is becoming "In AI we trust." Definitely something to think about.